So, as we looked at last time, and just very quickly to look at the geography portion of this, Moses started out from what is called Lower Egypt, and from Lower Egypt is where he left. Why did he leave? He was in a hurry. He had murdered someone. He had killed someone. And therefore, he was okay until he found out that even his fellow Hebrews knew about it. And the conclusion he made was, if they know about it, then Pharaoh will know about it, and he will have me killed as a result of me murdering an Egyptian, especially a Hebrew murdering an Egyptian. No matter what his background was in terms of growing up in the household of the daughter of Pharaoh, this would be the basis. So, let's see how this works. So he left probably out of that area. I am guessing that he went down toward Mount Sinai on the other side there. One of the reasons that I couldn't find a map, a 3D topographical map, that would really indicate why this probably was his path or his the trail or the way that he went. But if you look at a topographical map, then you would see that the interior portion of the Sinai Peninsula is very mountainous, and it's only right along the edge here and coming up along the edge is where you would have easier to walk the path that he would have wanted to do in order to get out of there fast. He could have gone up this way, and there are some ways to get through the mountains that run along here, but this is probably the easiest way, and it gets him away from Egypt the fastest. And of course, it takes him down here near Mount Sinai, which I'm sure when he was going through there, my supposition is he didn't know what was coming later in terms of his personal involvement with Mount Sinai. More so than any other character in the Bible, Moses is associated with Sinai for many reasons. And so it starts here. This is where it begins, his association with that. And when he came back, now that he's going back towards Sinai, and that's where the burning bush is, of course. And then from that, he's told then to go to Egypt. See if I can get that one to come up, okay. And he heads back, and probably somewhere where it's saying wilderness of Shur would be my guess, personal guess, is where he meets Aaron. Aaron has been told to get up and go by God, and he's already told Aaron to go when he's talking to Moses out of the burning bush. And so God has set all of this in motion, and so Aaron heads up, and we saw the episode with Zipporah there, but at any rate, he gets up and goes, heads back, he's with Aaron, and now he's poised to go in and talk to Pharaoh. Talk to the children of Israel, then he'll talk to Pharaoh. So, let's move on. I just wanted to go over again some of those New Testament references that we had, because those references shed light on the situation with Moses that we don't have from the Old Testament text. And so that's interesting from that standpoint that God saw fit that we would have information about Moses to give more information about his character and about the situations that are going on there as he has come out of Egypt and then going back in. So if you turn over to Acts 7, we're going to look at verses 34 through 35. And Doug Sample, you appear to be turning to that. If you're faking it and looking at some other book, then I'll give you time to get the Bible out. But if you would look at Acts 7 and read 34 through 35 for us, I would appreciate that. Okay, so Stephen is speaking here. He's speaking to the council. He's been brought before them. Why is Stephen brought to the council? I'll wait. I'm trying to kill time to be sure. Go ahead, Mike. Right, he was accused of being a blasphemer and a liar. But there were liars that accused him. And so they're making the accusation, and Stephen was beginning to gain a reputation locally there in Jerusalem for the work that he was doing for the Christians. And we know that he was one of the ones that was sent to minister to the Greek widows, but yet he was obviously active in other regards. And so the council has singled him out to eliminate him, basically, get rid of him. We're going to stamp out this group, and we're going to start with Stephen here. So, it's interesting that he says, and one of there are many other verses that are talked about that I just pulled these two verses out at this point. But he says this Moses, whom they rejected, going back to the just what we read about in the last class, said, "Who made you a ruler and a judge?" Interesting, they're calling him that because that's really what he will become, is a ruler and a judge. And his man sent God. Man, God sent as both ruler and redeemer. And what is the obvious image that he is portraying that's going to be fulfilled later? I mean, I told you everything. It's going to be Jesus Christ, right? He is the type, and Jesus Christ would be what we call the antitype. Or he is a precursor. Or he is the one that we can look back later and look at these aspects of Moses and tie him into Christ. And one of the points of that is Moses was a great guy, but Moses wasn't the main story. Okay? He is the chief character that we're reading about, however, is pointing toward Christ. It's really pointing toward Christ here. And so his nature is both ruler and redeemer by the hand of the angel who appeared to him in the bush. We talked about that earlier, whether it was God, whether it was an angel of God, and all of that. But anyway, so he's ruler and redeemer, and Moses, his roles in the Old Testament here are foreshadowing what Christ will be when he comes. He will be the lawgiver. His name will be represented with the law. And when they talk about later the law and the prophets, or Moses and the prophets. They're referring back, looking at what he did at this time. Okay, so let's look at also Hebrews 11:24 through 27. Hebrews 11:24 through 27. I'm going to pick on the guys in the back. Jay Cook, would you look that up? Because I think everybody will be able to hear the people in the back, even up to the front. So we're looking at Hebrews 11:24 through 27.
By faith, Moses, when he had grown up, refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter, choosing rather to endure ill treatment with the people of God than to enjoy the passing pleasures of sin. Considering the reproach of Christ, greater riches than the treasures of Egypt, for he was looking to the reward. By faith, he left Egypt, not fearing the wrath of the king, for he endured, as seeing him who is unseen.
Okay, so we see by that Moses made the choice. We find out more about it from what the writer in Hebrews is telling us about Moses than we knew in the story that we're actually reading right now. And that is that, first of all, his parents had faith that he could be saved. We found out a lot more about it from these passages than we do back in Exodus. And then Moses' own faith, he refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter and paid a high cost for that rejection. He paid a high cost for that. And he took his stand among the Israelites and cast away the treasures of Egypt. Obviously painting the picture that if Moses had chosen to remain in that lifestyle of the Egyptians and in effect renounced his own people and in effect renounced God, if he had done that, he could have lived a very pleasurable life in the household of Pharaoh, or at least the Pharaoh that was there at that time. So he cast away the treasures of Egypt, is what it says, and he looked to God in faith. We find out in Hebrews, the heroes of faith. And he looked for a suitable reward or recompense or result from God as a result of that. So that's gives us more we can understand about the nature of Moses. So let's move on. I told you last time you could look it up. The making of the bricks with straw, mud and straw, by the Israelites. And Michael Wilkes was kind enough to get this fixed up for me. Hopefully that we'll be able to look at that. This is from Appian Media, and it's a session that they did as a backstory to their film Out of Egypt. And it's about making mud bricks. And the one who's demonstrating it is Jeremy DeHutt. He'll be here for a meeting later in the year, next year, and you can talk to him about that if you want to. But we're going to see him making bricks out of mud and straw. Okay, so let's see if I can make this happen. There we go.
Thank you for letting me come to your brick factory. How long have you been making bricks here?
من حوالي 20 سنة.
20 years? How many bricks can you make in a day?
على حسب الأعمال. يعني حاليا أنا عندي مثلا كم عامل عندنا إيش؟ خمسة بيطلعوا 2000 ونص.
In a day?
Yeah. Yes.
So what goes into the bricks?
بنجيبوا التربة اللي هو بالنسبة للحاجة اللي بتدخل في الطينة يعني اللي هي تخليها متماسكة. لو من غيرها تقول كده القالب يبقى ما فيش.
Oh, it will not hold together.
Not hold together.
اللي هي ممكن تعيق معانا بعدين.
They start mix it, and take out stones, little stones. Like
Oh, he's looking for the stone. So he's feeling as he goes.
بالظبط بالظبط.
This looks hard.
They used to do it.
Uh-huh.
They have a great experience. For a normal guy, it's very hard.
Yeah. So I wouldn't want to arm wrestle them.
لا هو شجاع برضه تعبان.
No, he said no. Good grip.
This is actually one of the cooler things we've done so far. It gives us a taste of the Hebrew experience as slaves. It would be one thing if you were like these people making bricks for your own home or for your neighbors' homes, but they were forced to do this heavy labor. And as Jeremy will attest, it's not easy.
Can I try his job looking for the stones?
هتبقى عملية شاقة عليه شوي.
It will be hard for you.
That's okay.
Okay. It will be great. Yeah, but I will not do it. Be my guest.
Okay.
Gird your loins, man.
So grab here. Oh, that's heavy. Get it. Like this? It's moving. It comes at you.
هذه مسافة.
محمد قلنا لازم يبقى في مسافة بين الاثنين.
It is mucky. And it creates a suction. You can hear it. Yes. You're faster. You're faster. Thank you. Here. And he rolls it on the ground.
And took some water.
You make it look easy. Yeah?
Yeah, you know.
He knows.
لما جرب له قال
Let's start from scratch. Is that enough? Yes? It's good.
He said if you work here, you will be good. You need.
I would have a job.
Yeah.
I would have a job. Thank you, Joseph.
Maybe we think about the hard labor, but to be able to capture that and to see it firsthand was a pretty amazing experience.
You don't have to use them.
Okay. Pretty good. So you can see by that while that was fun to watch, and I guess fun for Jeremy to do that, the doing that all day, and all day meaning daylight till sunset probably, doing that all day long would have been arduous, hard, difficult. This is a big deal. Back-breaking labor. And what did he say, 2,500 bricks a day with five of the men that were working there on it at that site, and they had a process going. I mean, you could see where they could do it pretty quick. And they didn't have garden hoses back then, but they would have had water coming in through the various canals and this type of thing in order to make those bricks with straw. And then when they took away the straw, furnishing portion of that process, they had to go get their own, was absolutely no way they could have kept the quota going. And so that's how they did the bricks, probably back then. Had a form, some mud, some straw mixed together. One that part didn't show on this particular one, I saw one earlier, is there's a part of this where they're bringing the dirt and the clay together, and the men that are preparing that are rubbing their hands through it, throwing away the rocks that come up, because the rocks will also make it not as strong as just the finer sand that is there. So you had to get the sand there. I don't know how deep they could have dug. They had to have water handy, and then they had to process that and let them dry out. And 2,500 bricks a day. I wonder how many the children of Israel were making. A lot would be my guess. A lot. Thousands and thousands. And if you go back and look through some of the, I probably should have given some of the pictures here, but if you look back through some of the pictures of the brick walls that they have unearthed from ancient Egypt, there are these huge, long walls that they built, which is all that we found to date with that. And they're still there in place. And so in that climate, where there's not a lot of rain, they're able to preserve that for centuries, that structure. Something else, I'll just throw this out. While I was reading about that, I read an article that said that archaeologists recently have discovered indications of a huge pond and canal around the pyramids, and they think they might have used that for hydraulics, somehow with hydraulic pressure to raise the heavy stones that they use for building the pyramids. I only say that to say just because modern man hasn't figured all of that out yet, number one, doesn't mean that aliens did it with spaceships while they were supervising the construction of the pyramids, but would also indicate men today just haven't figured it out. As someone told me years ago that had been over visiting the Holy Land and Greece and Rome and those areas, he told me, he says, not all the smart people are living today. And I love that expression, because people were smart back then and they figured out how to do these things. And just because we haven't yet figured out how they used to do it doesn't mean that there was some mysterious way that they got that done. And at the least, we know with the pyramids, they did actually do that construction, because they're still there. And that is a massive construction project. Okay. I just wondered, Keenan, whether your dad has said anything about building those bricks or anything. He has one. Did he bring one back? Yeah. It's still in place? Still in place. Oh, okay. Well, good. Jeremy's son is with us in the class, so if you have any questions on that, Keenan would be glad to answer them following the class. Okay. I'm glad he washed his feet off. That's a good part of that. Okay. So we're in chapter 6, verses 1 through 9. And let's go ahead and read that. I'll tell you what, I will read that. But the Lord said to Moses, now you shall see what I will do to Pharaoh, for with a strong hand he will send them out, and with a strong hand he will drive them out of his land. And God spoke to Moses, verse 2, and said to him, I am the Lord. I appeared to Abraham, to Isaac, to Jacob as God Almighty. But by my name, I'm reading the English Standard Version, the Lord, I did not make myself known to them. I also established my covenant with them to give them the land of Canaan, the land in which they lived as sojourners. They didn't buy land when Abraham and his sons were going through the land of Canaan. They refused to buy the land. They didn't want to do it for a lot of reasons, one major reason. Except one piece of land was purchased. You remember what that was? Yeah, a burial site for Sarah, Machpelah, the cave at Machpelah. So that was purchased, but that was the exception to the rule. Rest of the land wasn't, because it's their land later, and they're going to come back, and God's going to give it to them through conquest. And so he says in verse 5, moreover, God's talking, I have heard the groaning of the people of Israel, whom the Egyptians hold as slaves. I remembered my covenant. So does that mean that God's memory is such that he just doesn't remember everything? He's got so much going on, and he's sitting here thinking about his people. He's heard their prayers, and, oh yeah, I forgot about that. I remember I've got a group of people down there. Is that what that means? No, I exaggerate on that. So what did he mean by that? Yeah, they have a covenant that started under Abraham, right? And this covenant is ongoing until it's fulfilled. And God has made promises to these people. He has the power to fulfill those promises, and he'll do it in his time. He'll do it in his time. So, even though it's been 400 years, they've been sitting there, in effect, there's a purpose for that. And one of the purposes is he's going to build this nation to a mighty group of people. It starts out with 70, and we're going to end up with maybe 2 to 3 million that are there. A huge amount of people that are going to be coming out. Okay, and so he remembers them, which in effect means that he will respond to their prayers, and now he's going into action based upon his earlier promises to them. That's what it means when it says he remembered. It means I've taken that into account, and now's the time for this to happen. He mentions a name in chapter 6, verse 3, and he says in chapter 2, right before verse 3, I am the Lord, using the name Yahweh there, as we talked about. But this name, God Almighty, is not the name Yahweh, but it's rather El Shaddai, the way I pronounce it. I was told by a Bible teacher 50 years ago that probably most Bible names you can pronounce at least 3 ways properly, so that's one of the ways you can properly pronounce that, El Shaddai, or Shaddai, or whatever else. Means God, the mountain one. It's the association of God with Sinai, the most powerful, God Almighty. Okay, and so the emphasis here that God is making is on his promise, and specifically the land promise. That's what the emphasis is in this passage, and that phraseology is only used 2 other times so far in the Old Testament. One time was in Genesis, 15 verse 7. That was talking to Abraham about the land promise. And in Genesis 28:13, talking to Jacob about the land promise. And now here with Moses, talking about the land promise. So, I am the Lord has been used before, but now he's specifically using this expression of himself as a big deal. His name associated with his people. His name and his people. Okay. So now we come down. I'm not going to read all the verses. Verse 9. It says Moses spoke to the people of Israel. They did not listen to Moses. Why? Right? What else? The end of verse 9. Broken spirit and harsh slavery. That's right. Because of their condition. You think that might give an indication to some issues that we might face and what our reaction might be? If we're broken spirit, discouraged because some event in our lives or set of events in our lives, broken spirit, and we feel like we're in harsh slavery. I don't think any of us know what harsh slavery is, but mentally we can be under pressure from work, from family, from conditions to where we have that kind of reaction that the people here did. They just want to give up. And that's not so different sometimes from what Moses is. Sometimes he just, he's not all gung-ho about what God is telling him to do. Okay, so they didn't listen to Moses because they're broken spirit and their harsh slavery. And yet God says, I don't care. In effect, get in and go speak to Pharaoh again. He keeps pushing him back. Go back, Moses. Go talk to him. And so, what is Moses' response in verse 12? Uncircumcised lips, faltering lips, unskilled lips. God, I'm just not your man for this. And of course, it's already given him Aaron for this, but he keeps coming back to this when things get tougher. God told him there would be this resistance from Pharaoh. That by itself should be some comfort when you're going through problems to know what I'm facing right now is difficult, but there's something on the other end. There's something on the other end. Just like today, trivial things that we face, we may look at something like, I'm sorry to use this example, but when I played football in high school in Tampa, we had in August for 2 weeks, we had 2-a-day practices. That was awful. It was dirty, it was hot, it was humid, and it was tough. We'd go out there for a couple hours and do all these drills and wind sprints and all this stuff. And then we'd go home and eat and rest and get up and go back again, 2-a-days. And so that to me was tough, but in my head, I thought, in 2 weeks we'll be going to school, we'll only have afternoon football practice, it won't be as crazy as what we're going through here now, I can get through that. And that doesn't compare with what they were going through. But it gives me, in my mind, an example of if I can see something an hour later, like I will finish teaching this class for a while, in about 10 minutes I'm done. I can see the end of that, You can too. You can rejoice with me on that point. And so when you can see the end and you'll know that you'll get there, you have faith that you will get there, then you can get through stuff. And of course, that's the way we need to look at our lives today. So in verse 13, God, the Lord, Yahweh, reaffirms his direction and message. My power is sufficient. It will happen when I say so. Okay. I've gotten through all of that. We'll go to the next part. By the way, that's Moses and Aaron in front of Pharaoh. And we get to the point, kind of a weird thing happens. We're going through this whole story. Everything's building up. We're ready to go. And we stop right here in verse 14. These are the heads of their fathers' houses. Is this an appropriate place to put a genealogy? Of course it is, because God put it there. I know that's the obvious answer, but it seems like reading this narrative, it goes through, and then 14 through 25, we jump into this genealogy. Why is the genealogy important? This is one of those where you raise your hand. And yes. That's right. And probably who's reading this? After they've come from Sinai, probably the group of people who are left in the wilderness wanderings are the ones that, after Moses recorded this, that they're looking back on it. So it's very important to establish the bona fides of Moses and Aaron, because the priesthood has been established now, and we're going to go back, and the writer, Moses, is going to prove that he and Aaron are of the proper line, the proper pedigree. So if you look at that, that's the family tree. Like almost all genealogies in the Bible, it's not complete. It just gives what's important for the narrative of the story at this point. And so we go down, and there's a couple things that we see there. First of all, in verse 15, there's a Canaanite woman who's mentioned in that. Now, as far as regard for pedigree, the Israelites were certainly that way, and yet we've got a Canaanite woman included in this genealogy. It reminds me of Christ's genealogy, like in Matthew 1 or in Luke, but especially Matthew 1. And we see that there are, if you will, Canaanite women or non-Israelite women, non-Hebrew women that are included in that line, like Rahab and Ruth. And so it is mentioned, and that's the strength of the Bible there. Okay? Another one is Aaron's wife, Elisheba, if I pronounce that right, is from the tribe of Judah, not from the tribe of Levi. And Amram and Jochebed get married. Jochebed's mentioned later and earlier. But what relationship initially is she to Amram? Aunt, that's right, the aunt. And so Amram's wife is his father's sister. And that is not as weird as it may sound to begin with. First of all, the laws of intermarriage are not there yet because it hadn't been codified as it is under the law, Leviticus, number one. But number two, even under the law, she wasn't considered a close relative, as I read, from what I read earlier. And let's see, I think that's all. I'll jump to one other point. There's another point there. There are two names under Aaron's, and they're not all listed here, but two of Aaron's sons are not listed, Nadab and Abihu. Why would that be? They're not around anymore when this is written, right? And if you don't remember that story, you can go to Numbers and look that up yourself. So, we're finishing up chapter 6, and it ends like it has been through here so many times. Moses said to the Lord, "Behold, I am of uncircumcised lips. How will Pharaoh listen to me?" And for the answer to that, come Sunday, and Jeremy will tell you. Zach will tell you all about that. Sorry about that. Zach will. Appreciate your comments. We'll stop there.